Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are going to look at the datamine for the update Wind of Change first dev server and also go through some other information which is bouncing about. It was kind of annoying with this dev server because when it came to the preliminary notes that they put out, they didn't actually put any ground stuff in there. I don't know if it was a mistake or if, they just didn't have the changes lined up for it, but there were a bunch of changes for ground vehicles which just weren't mentioned when it came to the preliminary notes. There is some quite nice stuff in the preliminary notes though. They're actually changing some of the ways that certain mechanics work, such as fire prevention and also repairing, which is really nice, basically making it more team-wide instead of just squad-wide, and that is absolutely fantastic when it comes down to it. The actual text from the preliminary notes says, when it's right at the bottom, it says fire extinguishment assistance is now available for all allies. Previously was available for squad mates and light tanks only. And then it says repair assistance is now available for all allies. Previously was available for squad mates and light tanks only. And then squad mates and light tanks accelerate the repair ×3 and other types of allied vehicles ×2. So there you go. I think that's awesome. I'm really happy to see that, and more team play is always good. Another thing to also mention about the datamine, and just in general when it comes to the dev server stuff, remember this stuff isn't finished. I've seen a lot of people talking about certain bugs which are going around, the Type 74 one, which if that's not a bug, that's insane, but I'm pretty sure it's a bug where they've really limited the vehicle's maximum speed, and also a bunch of other things, loadouts as well for vehicles. The one thing that has to be understood is a lot of the new vehicles don't have their proper loadouts, and I think that's because they're implementing a new system for customization of those loadouts. It would be very odd that everything like the F-104 ASA, the MiG-23 MLA, the A-10, none of these have their proper loadouts, but at the same time, Mike did mention in the dev stream that they were working on something, so hopefully we get a second dev server so we can have a look at it, see how it works, and all of that stuff. In the datamine, funnily enough, in the files, there's actually a place in the files where it always says like launch date or proposed launch date kind of thing, and this time it was set to the 15th of March, which obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously isn't happening, but it would be very, very surprising if it happened, the update coming out tomorrow. But we'll see. Check the news during the day to see what goes on. Also, at the same time, thank you to Zabi for putting all the datamines together. What he does for this community is fantastic and should always be thanked for it, just like everybody else who chips in when it comes to finding out new content about the game and trying to understand it more. And another thing to say before we get into it, thank to you guys, basically. I don't really know how to put it, but it's been very positive over the last few days. It's been really nice, seeing comments, really nice seeing discussions around things, and the overall support that you have given me and also the content has been fantastic, and I just personally want to say thank you. Now, looking at the first set of the datamine, there isn't too much here, which hasn't been covered in other videos, but basically there is a little bit. So there's the MPK PR12412P. This thing actually doesn't have any data associated with it yet, so we had a look at it in the first in the files video, but I didn't realize that the standard one was already in the tech tree, so I thought it wasn't actually in the game, but yeah, so everybody makes mistakes. But yeah, it looks like that's probably going to come in as a premium vehicle or a squadron vehicle or an event vehicle, but right now it doesn't have any actual data on it. When it comes to some of the other vehicles, when it comes to the Shot Cal Gimel, that is after the Aleph, so that's basically where you'll be able to see that thing. And also at the same time, there was a few other machines that were around the place when it comes to the when it comes to the actual files. We had a look at a bunch of them, and you can kind of guess where they're going to be when it comes to Israelis, like the Galbatash. The Galbatash is going to be after the Magak 6B, for example, and also at 9.3. So that technically would be the highest PR vehicle that Israel would have access to. which would be interesting to see in general. They have changed a bunch of texts for stuff, and also new menu texts. So Israeli ground forces, obviously, all the APS texts as well, such as like active protection system, reaction time, threat velocity, and they've even changed a bunch of tournament texts. So maybe we're going to get some more integration of the tournaments into the client. So stuff like coming soon, day, and then number, session, start, training, stuff like that. So we'll have to see what goes on with that little area. They've also changed the names of a bunch of vehicles, so stuff like the Flusy 1 is now the Christian de Grosse, and then also the Omaha class and the USS Raleigh 1940 are now 1942s. They added a bunch of new modifications. Obviously, most of these are for new vehicles. Stuff like the HF-7A, HF-18, even the GBU-8 that we talked about, and also things like the R60MK. The PF-10 one I can't actually find at least in the viewers, so we'll have to see what goes on with that. But they also added a bunch of 76mm stuff, but I'm pretty sure that's for the Italian boat that's coming around. There's some new sensors as well, the Type 280 and the Sapphire 23 MLA, TP23M, and the APSs, you've got the Drozd and also the Iron Fist. So it's being labeled the Iron Fist, I believe the Challenger one, and if that's the case, we will have to see how that affects, other vehicles when they get access to it. Also, there's some new countermeasures, the MUSS and also the JD3. They also added a bunch of weapons to the game, and they all correspond to the new vehicles that they're on. So stuff like the RB-53 Bantam, which is on the new Swedish Huey, for example. So there's nothing really interesting or new there, which I haven't already covered. Then there's a bunch of weapons which have been renamed as well, just to make them a bit more clear. And also, at the same time, they've added a new shell type. This is the SAP-HEI. Now, we already have this one in game, but this is different from the existing one, and I'm pretty sure it's the shell which is on the Begleitpanzer, a vehicle which seems to be going through a lot of changes, but right now they seem to have removed its APHE and added the SAP-HEI to it. You can only bring 10 of them, though, on the dev server, and also only 10 of the HUVT, so that might be quite a big nerf to the Begleitpanzer. At the same time, they added some decorations that we talked about, the 2 Israeli crew helmets in the extras video, and also they added the submachine gun for Germany. This one is the one which is linked to the Term 3 pack, so if you buy the Term 3 if you pre-order, the Term 3, then you get access to, I believe it's the MP5, or at least it's some kind of submachine gun used by Germany. They've added a bunch of new challenges, obviously relating to Israel, and all of the new medals for Israel as well. The general fact is it's nice that Israel is coming out with all of these, and you'll be able to grind them out, which is quite nice. And obviously they changed the avatars once again for the modern tankers. It was so weird that they were just kind of removed from the game for some reason, and then they brought them back. So that's really nice to see. That's happened. The T62 Chinese edition and also the Kiyoshimo are once again pack premiums, so maybe they're going to bring them out for future events, which would be nice to see. And also, at the same time, they've added number of vehicles needed to unlock the next tier data for Chinese, Swedish, and Israeli helicopters. The Chinese helicopter dream could be coming soon. We'll have to see. The Swedish heli dream, which nobody saw coming, is here. And the Israeli helicopters, obviously with the P-10 in the tech tree, maybe they'll get their tech tree soon. But the Chinese helicopters, the thing that was being announced, that it was being developed on about 2 years ago now, finally, there is some extra news about it. Isn't that absolutely wonderful? They've also changed a bunch of reward multipliers and economy stuff when it comes to that, but that is something that we'll have to go over in detail in a separate video, because it will literally take years to go through all of the different slight changes that they're doing. They've changed a bunch of stat card images for certain vehicles like the RO43 and the Kar-Chi, and also some tech tree images for stuff like the P63 and the Folder. So that's quite nice, updating them. I'm guessing they weren't up to standard. And also some new flags in the game. So you've got Modern Greece, Slovakia, and also South Vietnam. Now, we talked about this in the In the Files 2 video. Modern Greece seems to be linked to an Apache, which is probably coming as the premium for the Americans. Then the South Vietnamese is the Kim Quy, the new patrol boat, which is coming to the coastal tree for the US. But what about Slovakia? Can anybody make a link to where does Slovakia come into these things? I'd like to see some guesses on that one. There's also a new spectator camera, which is the replay gun camera, so that'll be super cool to actually see. We have the TF-34 new engine sound added as well, and they've also changed how wind parameters are. They've been expanded and refined. Now blasts are not only effects, but generating wind as well, which is super cool and will look really nice in general. They've changed a lot of little things about certain flight models, such as the B-17s, but also for the A7E, they've actually removed the ANAPQ-126 radar. So this is quite a big deal. But they did also add the GBU-8 to it. So now you can bring 4 GBU-8s along with missiles if you want to. And also the A7D lost its ANAPQ-126 radar as well, but also got the GBU-8. So a negative and a positive when it comes to those vehicles. The BTD got access to the 1,600-pound AP bomb, which is kind of useless in game, but you know how it is. I mean, I suppose extra options are always better. There's a bunch of vehicles which are getting slight changes to their loadouts or slight changes to the amount of ammo that they have in some turrets, so I'm going to skip over that because they're not huge deals. Most of them are just historical changes and just making sure that everything is in line. What's interesting to me is the J8B, which we haven't seen yet, but it has some unused new loadouts on it, and obviously right now the J8B doesn't use any loadouts, so these are probably going to be the ones that it gets access to. So it gets 2 PL11s, 2 PL5Bs, or 4 PL5Bs. So these are the standard loadouts, and then I'm guessing you'll be able to customize them. I saw a lot of people talking about the F104S ASA, where why does it only have like a loadout with 4 AIM-9Ls and nothing else, and then the ASPEEDs and nothing else. It's the same reason why the MiG-23 MLA only has, you know, two missiles when if it runs like the R24T setup or something like that. It's basically the fact that they're obviously working on a new system that tries to incorporate all of these different things together, and there's no point in putting the old system in for these new vehicles if they're going to be putting it into a new system. This is why I hope there's a second dev server so we can go over all of the different loadouts, because I think right now, because of how it was set up on the dev server, people have very odd perceptions about certain vehicles because of how their loadouts were set up. And now we get on to some of the ground changes, and I feel like most people have been focusing on some of these, which is fair because, as I said, for some reason in the major patch notes for the dev server, there was pretty much nothing about any of these in ground. They changed a bunch of vehicles to give themselves volumetric armor, which is super cool. Stuff such as the M60A2, T55A, the AM1, the T62G, the ZTZ59, and the 69. All these now have volumetric turrets. Stuff like the M163 and all of its other variants, like the T114, well, not the T114, but the CM25 and the M113A1 TOW. All of those now have water break animations. That's super cool on the vehicle. And also the Baguette Panzer. Now this one seems to have stirred up a lot of debate around what's going on with the thing. And to be honest with you, I don't know. I would love to have some clarification on what is going on with the Baguette Panzer. So first of all, when it comes to the vehicle, it now has a stabilizer, but it only on the dev server had a stabilizer if you didn't have the ITOW modification installed. So if you turn that off and you ran the vehicle with just a standard tow, then it had a 2-plane stabilizer on the gun, up to, I think it was like maybe, well, it was up to a certain kilometer an hour. And it was like, okay, well, that's fair. But also, why? Because I don't think the addition of using an ITOW over a tow, like the launch is the same, the system's the same that the vehicle used, so why would that affect the stabilization of the main gun on the Baguette Panzer, the 57mm? And so that was just super weird. Like it seemed very buggy to me. And then also at the same time, there's a lot of conflicting reports. Like I've read sources which say the gun was stabilized. I have read sources where the gun says it wasn't stabilized. I've read sources saying that the later variant of this specific gun on the Baglette Panzer was stabilized, but the one that was actually put on the prototype wasn't stabilized. The thing is all over the place when it comes to information on it. And also at the same time, they massively have increased the turret rotation speed and gun elevation speed of this thing. So it'll be able to whip it around really, really quickly. At the same time, the cannon breech is also no longer part of the crew compartment, so you can't overpressure the vehicle through that area anymore. And now the fuel tanks are in the part of the crew compartment. So if this thing gets a stabilizer, which it could do, it's going to go up in BR again, which kind of sucks because I kind of like where it is right now. It's a fantastic vehicle to play. Another thing that also happened to it though is that it got the SAP shell, but it was limited to 10 rounds, and its HEVT was also limited to 10 rounds, meaning that the effectiveness of the vehicle was massively reduced. Another interesting little buff is to the Archer. I love the Archer. It's a very fun vehicle, actually. Even though it's a bit dodgy to play, it's got a really nice gun on it, so you can kind of use it in any situation. Its reload has actually gone from 5.71 seconds to 4.72, so it's actually been pretty much improved when it comes to the vehicle. And then when it comes to the Type 74s, this one is where it was a little bit odd. And this is where I feel like there is definitely a bug. And I think Zabby thinks the same thing while looking at it. So when it comes to all of the Type 74s, the gun elevation speed has gone from 4.5 to 4 degrees per second. That kind of hurts, but it's not a huge thing. You know, it's pretty low, but it's okay. The Type 74 C, E, and F, their max reverse speed went from 14 to 7 kilometers an hour. So that's a bit rough, you know, basically going or losing half of your overall speed. And then the max speed for the Type 74G, so the premium one, has gone from 53 kilometers an hour to 14. So it now has 4 gears for its transmission and can only go 14 kilometers an hour. So yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a bug. It seems like somebody screwed it up when it comes to the machine, and also the max reverse speed has gone from 16 to 4. So yes, I think that'll be reverted. I'm sure it'll be fixed. Just like there was a horrific bug with the F104 ASA that actually I ran into, where if you installed one of its loadouts, what ended up happening was it immediately crashed your game. And then if you tried to reload the game, what would end up happening is you got stuck in that crash circle, so you couldn't actually open the game. So that modification got removed pretty quickly, thank God. There's been a bunch of changes to max speeds of certain things, such as the STRF 9040B, its reverse speed going from 40 to 45, and also at the same time there's all the additions of stuff such as the Israeli crew replenishment image, which looks really nice, and they've added a few gears to certain things, like the CV90-105. It's now got 2 more forward gears and a reverse gear, so that should mean its acceleration should be kind of interesting to see. They're massively changing the damage models of most of the larger ships in the game again, so it looks like they're not happy with the results, or at least they're fine-tuning them. So with battleships and battlecruisers, the number of compartments has been lowered, but their HP has been increased. The number of citadels has been lowered, and they've added citadel armor plates. The belts have been weakened, but they've also added belt armor plates on top of that. The coal bunker HP is lowered, and the crew has also been redistributed. When it comes to cruisers, the number of compartments, bulkheads, and covers have been lowered, and the crew has also been redistributed. The water weight velocity has increased, and the critical water levels have also increased. When it comes to destroyers, the number of covers increased, their HP also lowered, the number of bulkheads has been lowered, breach repair speed increased, water weight velocity increased, and additional water depth threshold has been lowered, with the critical water level increased as well. The frigates and torpedo boats, the breach repair speed has been increased, and the water weight velocity has been increased. The subchaser breach repair speed has been increased, and the gunboats and the Artilleriefaren Pram, which is a rough thing to say, the repair speed on their breach has been increased, the water weight velocity has been increased, and the multiplier with the additional water death threshold lowered as well, with the critical water levels increased. So they're definitely moving around with those things. At the same time, they've also changed a bunch of turret rotation of many different vehicles when it comes to naval, and also the amount of ammo that specific guns have. So once again, they're just fine-tuning stuff to try and make it as realistic as possible. On the Eugenio de Savoia, they actually added a radar to it, which is pretty cool. And also at the same time, many shells were changed to DMAR penetration, resulting in lots of changes, meaning that even stuff like the 7.92 MGs, they had their fire rates changed, and the Shakass, the overheating was lowered, which is quite nice. But pretty much everything when it comes to, 8mm or 7.92mm, all the way up to things like 57s or even 30mm, all got a bunch of stuff changed when it came to their ballistics and how they work. So this actual change here is huge when it comes to it. DMAR used to be one of those things that only really affected higher caliber stuff, but now it seems to be affecting absolutely everything. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see what goes forward. There was also a few changes to certain bombs and stuff, like different weights and, how they move around the place. And then just for new CDK additions, so we have the Mirage F1 textures we talked about, basically the cockpit stuff, the F5A IDC, which we had a look at yesterday, and the AH-64 for Greece, the Mi-28 for Sweden. But also, what is interesting is a US premium heli was denied for this update, and so was a Swedish one. So neither of these are going to be the premiums, which are about right now. And then also, there was a Carentan ground map with 300-pound M31 bombs and also 600-pound M32 ones. The Carentan map, I feel like I've read that before, but I don't know exactly where. They've also added an Era SBEC map for Smolensk, so look forward to that. But that's pretty much all of the changes from the Datamine. I've skipped over some things such as the specificities when it comes to the slight changes between penetration, because they only changed by like 1 or 2 millimeters. But one thing to note is if you want to check any of these out, all the links are in the description, so make sure to have a look at that stuff. Thank you all for watching, as always, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Merciless Reaper, Jerry Provolt, Megadino King, Professor X1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, Moxie, B. Young, and Derek R. Barine, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.